All right, so here's the 411. It looks like the FBI raided Somali, Illinois governor's office. 112 dirty cops and 3.4 tons of drugs. Let's take a look.
DEA says it's doubling down on its already considerable campaign against those who profit from the most lethal drug ever unleashed on the American public.
4:32 a.m., Chicago, Illinois. 112 officials compromised. A sitting governor, 3.4 tons of narcotics seized. $410 million laundered. This wasn't a drug raid. It was a political breach, a cartel pipeline inside state power. Let me show you how deep it goes. 5:41 a.m., Chicago, Illinois. The city was still half asleep when the federal convoy rolled through the government district. No sirens, no flashing lights, just the low hum of engines cutting through the cold, gray air. Frost clung to parked cars. Office windows were dark. Nothing suggested that history was about to break open. The target was not a warehouse, not a border crossing. It was the Chicago Executive Office of Governor Hassan Abdirahman Noor, the Somali-born leader celebrated for his rise through American politics. At exactly 5:41, a reinforced door gave way in seconds. Agents moved fast and silent, weapons down but ready. Inside, the space looked ordinary. Polished desks, framed photos, the Illinois flag standing beside the American one. The symbols of trust were everywhere. Then the illusion collapsed. Behind a locked administrative cabinet, agents uncovered 9.5 kilograms of cocaine, sealed and marked. In a financial records safe, fentanyl bricks wrapped in medical packaging. From a concealed compartment beneath the floor, firearms and encrypted drives. This was not an outside attack on the system. This was power itself, breached from within. If you're still watching, comment breach so I know you're following the truth. What investigators uncovered was far colder than fear. Governor Hassan Abdirahman Noor and his wife operated without urgency, without panic, without mistakes. This was not crime born from pressure. Behind the governor's speeches and ceremonial smiles existed a second structure, one that did not rely on violence at first. It relied on paperwork, spreadsheets, calendars, the quiet authority of official stamps. Decisions were never rushed. Routes were tested like experiments. If a shipment failed, it was logged, adjusted, and reintroduced weeks later through a different corridor. Money did not flood in. It flowed. Over 7 years, investigators traced more than $214 million through a lattice of shell entities designed to look charitable, medical, and administrative. Clinics that never opened, community programs that never existed, emergency grants that quietly became operating capital. Each transfer wore a respectable label. Each one passed through hands trained to never ask why. But the most disturbing discovery was not financial. Internal communications showed discussions about neighborhoods the way others discuss terrain. Areas were classified by risk, not to protect residents, but to decide where violence could be absorbed without attention. When shootings rose, routes were not shut down. They were reinforced. When overdoses spiked, shipments were adjusted, not reduced. Lives were treated as acceptable loss. The governor's wife oversaw the most efficient layer. Her network converted public care systems into logistical shields. Medical credentials became access keys. Patient
Even the governor's wife was in on it. Wow.
records became camouflage. Funds meant to keep the elderly alive were repurposed to keep routes open. This was not greed spiraling out of control. It was discipline stripped of conscience. They didn't need intimidation. They didn't need chaos. They trusted the system to protect them because they had built it to do exactly that. And once that truth surfaced, the investigation stopped being about corruption. It became about containment. If you've ever trusted the system without questioning it, share this video. Someone you know needs to see this part. 3:58 a.m. The command came through without drama. One word: execute. Across Illinois, phones vibrated at the same second. Maps that had lived on command center walls for weeks turned from planning tools into orders. red zones, blue arrows, circles drawn around places that, to the public, looked harmless. Clinics, warehouses, community centers, quiet suburban homes. The war began before sunrise. Highways leading out of Chicago were sealed in silence. State troopers rolled concrete barriers into place as tactical units slipped down frozen side streets. Above the city, drones lifted and fanned outward, their cameras piercing rooftops, garages, and tree lines. A helicopter hovered low over the industrial corridor, its rotors scattering powder snow across empty loading docks. The first breach hit a former medical supply warehouse on the south side. The building looked abandoned, rusted signage, broken windows, but when the door exploded inward, agents stepped into a factory of death. Industrial presses, chemical barrels, vacuum sealing machines already warm. 72 kilograms of narcotics sat packaged for immediate distribution. 2 men ran. A K-9 team cut them off in less than 8 seconds. 20 minutes later, gunfire broke out in a residential pocket near Cicero. A garage door burst open. 3 armed figures sprinted into the dark, slipping between houses. A drone locked on, projecting a white crosshair over the lead runner. He didn't know he'd already been boxed in. Snow kicked up as agents closed from both sides. 1 man dropped. The other 2 went down hard, cuffed in a backyard still decorated with children's toys. By 4:40 a.m., the operation was everywhere. A converted church basement revealed pill presses and cash counters beneath stained glass windows. A non-profit office held nothing but empty desks until a false floor opened to expose rifles wrapped in prayer rugs. At a riverfront pier, agents intercepted a truck minutes from departure. Its
Rifles wrapped in prayer rugs. That means the Muslims were involved.
manifest listing medical relief supplies. Inside, fentanyl bricks stacked like textbooks. Resistance flared in pockets. Not chaos, panic. Shots fired, doors slammed, engines roared and died under spike strips. In one suburban raid, a suspect barricaded himself inside a townhouse. Negotiations failed. The breach lasted 12 seconds. When daylight finally crept over Chicago, 41 locations had fallen. The numbers were staggering. Over 312 kilograms of narcotics, $187 million in cash, gold, and digital assets.
$187 million in cash, gold, and assets. That's unbelievable.
46 weapons caches, more than 120 arrests before noon. To the public, it looked sudden. To the agents moving through smoke, snow, and shattered doors, it was the release of months of pressure. This was no longer an investigation. It was a purge, and it was only the middle of the story. If you want the full picture, not headlines, not excuses, subscribe now. The next chapters go even deeper. What emerged next was not written in shipping logs or bank wires. It was written in people. As agents began cross-referencing arrest records, immigration files, and street-level intelligence, a second structure surfaced beneath the narcotics network. Quieter, darker, and far more destabilizing. Drugs were only one half of the operation. The other was manpower. Over a 4-year span, more than 600 men had been funneled into Illinois through channels tied directly to the governor's inner circle. They did not arrive as families. They did not pass through traditional resettlement pipelines. They arrived alone, staggered, undocumented in practice, but protected on paper. Their profiles told a story no press release ever had. Prior arrests in other states, gang affiliations scrubbed from records, military scars that did not match any Allied service history. Some had been flagged years earlier, only to have those flags quietly removed. They were not brought in to integrate. They were brought in to operate. Investigators mapped the aftermath of their arrival. Within 18 months, neighborhoods along specific corridors saw patterns that could not be dismissed as coincidence. 73 shootings, 109 armed robberies, 31 human trafficking cases. Each incident traced back not to random violence, but to clusters of individuals connected through the same intake channels. The violence was not uncontrolled. It was applied. Internal communications revealed the logic. These men were used to enforce territory, intimidate local resistance, and secure distribution zones that drugs alone could not protect. When law enforcement pressure increased in one district, activity shifted, not because the network was losing ground, but because it was repositioning assets. The most chilling layer involved public funds. Several of the men carried credentials issued by healthcare contractors tied to the governor's wife. They wore badges. They accessed buildings. They moved freely through facilities meant to serve the elderly and disabled. Medicaid billing records later showed millions of dollars in fabricated services. Reimbursements paid for care that never happened. That money did not vanish. It paid for...
This sounds a lot like the Minnesota situation, right? You got Somalis involved. You got drugs involved, cartels involved. You got illegals coming here, being brought in off the record, being protected by politicians. You've got just a total lawlessness here. I mean, you got fentanyl that can literally kill people being made in pill presses. Wow, unbelievable, right under our noses.
For weapons, vehicles, and silence. In one documented case, a shooting outside a grocery store left 2 elderly bystanders wounded. The shooter was later identified as a man whose caregiver services had billed the state $1.9 million in less than a year.
Fraud.
Money meant to keep vulnerable citizens alive had been converted into ammunition. This was no longer organized crime in the traditional sense. It was population manipulation. Entire apartment blocks became staging areas. Community centers became meeting points. Fear spread unevenly, concentrated in places least equipped to resist it. Residents learned which streets to avoid, which hours to stay inside, which questions not to ask. By the time analysts finished assembling the timeline, one conclusion was unavoidable. The network did not merely tolerate violence. It required it. Violence created chaos. Chaos created cover. And under that cover, the system continued to function. The case had begun with drugs in an office. Now it was about something far more dangerous. Drugs were only half the story. People were the other half. If this changed how you see public safety, comment truth below. As the arrests mounted, investigators realized the network did not survive on fear alone. It survived on cooperation. Quiet, deliberate cooperation embedded deep inside institutions people trusted every day. This was not a cartel bribing officials one by one. It was a system recruiting itself. Documents seized during the raids revealed a rhythm, predictable, almost elegant. Zoning approvals appeared days before warehouses changed hands. Health permits were granted hours before new clinics opened. Clinics that never saw patients but received shipments. Traffic enforcement along certain trucking routes dropped sharply the same week's new transport exemptions were signed. Nothing overlapped by accident. A county police commander approved temporary access waivers allowing uninspected cargo through secured corridors. A procurement officer authorized bulk equipment purchases that never arrived. A city planning board held meetings lasting less than 15 minutes, during which multiple properties were rezoned without discussion. Every decision had a paper trail. Every paper trail looked legitimate on its own. Together, they formed a pipeline. Banking records exposed the calm efficiency of the financial layer. Transfers labeled as consulting fees, security assessments, and community partnerships moved at precise intervals. One account received $32,000 every month for nearly 2 years, registered to a police.
Unbelievable, the fraud, waste, and abuse that was going on. The FBI raids Somali, Illinois governor's office. Over 112 dirty cops are involved. Unreal.